Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today, chatting with all of you amazing Bodywork students. Before we dive in, let's set the tone for today's talk. I like to call this a conversation with Bodywork students. Pretty simple, right? But the subtitle? Well, it's a professional career where you're largely on your own. Sounds liberating and a little bit scary, right? And that's exactly how it should feel. Now, if you get to know me, you'll quickly learn that I love talking in opposites. It's kind of like a mental exercise for me. When someone says bright, I think dim. If they say light, I think dark. It's a little trick I picked up to always find a balanced middle ground. It helps me stay open-minded. But hey, sometimes you just have to pick a side, right? Either way, there's always a conversation to be had. So, today, I'm here not just as a psychotherapist, yes, I've been doing that for over 40 years, but also as someone who's been teaching as an adjunct professor for more than 52 years. Yep, 52. And guess what? I'm going to argue that what I do and what you'll be doing have way more in common than you might think. Sure, you work on the body, and I work on the mind. But our careers are surprisingly similar because both of our professions have carved out their own unique paths within healthcare. We're part of a special category, one where we're not as connected to the traditional, medically driven fields. And honestly, that's pretty awesome. Now, I feel more connected to your world than to the world of, say, psychiatrists or psychologists. Here's why. I'm 83 years old. Yep, still kicking. And when I started in my field, it wasn't as medical as it is today. I don't use a lot of medical jargon in my work because, frankly, I don't think it's that helpful. And I believe you'll find that, as body workers, you'll develop your own unique language too, one that feels more aligned with your work and your clients. Here's one major difference between you and physicians. You work with the entire body. Most physicians today rarely even touch their patients. They use tools, stethoscopes, x-rays, and other gadgets that often distance them from truly engaging with their clients. But you're hands-on. You see your clients as people, not objects, and that makes a world of difference. Now, a little more about me. I've had a pretty independent career. I was an adjunct professor for many years and have also directed nonprofit agencies. Working in nonprofits is rewarding because you're not driven by profit. Instead, it's all about providing the best service you can, as long as you can stay afloat. I was fortunate to secure funding from both governments and nonprofits, which allowed me to run things the way I wanted to without being consumed by profit margins. I've also maintained a small private practice, nothing extravagant, because I've never been all about the money. I've been lucky enough to design a career that works for me, and I truly believe you'll have the same opportunity in your own journey. So, that's a little peek into my world and how it parallels your path. I've been able to keep my fees the same as they were, wait for it, back in the 1980s. Yup. You heard that right. I still charge $35 a session. That's the highest I go. And some clients? Well, if $10 is all they can afford, that's totally fine with me. Now, how have I managed to pull this off? It's all about referrals. I've never needed to advertise. Every single person who comes to me has heard about me from someone else. It's that word-of-mouth magic. Now, some of you out there might be thinking, hey, I want to be independent like that. Well, let me tell you, that's great. But I do have to be real with you. It involves a lot of good fortune and risk. Here's one of the biggest things to consider. Each of you will be in close quarters with your clients. Now, this is a beautiful thing because you get to truly serve the people you're working with. But with that comes responsibility. You've got to set the boundaries and rules. The relationship you build with your clients? That's on you. And let's be honest, Clients come to us in a vulnerable state. They're in discomfort, and they're looking for relief. One big difference between my work and what many of you might do is that I focus from the neck up all mind work. I don't touch my clients unless I know them well, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get a hug or handshake on their way out. But that's it. You, on the other hand, might have a much more physical interaction with your clients. You'll chat, or maybe you won't. They'll chat, or maybe they won't. It's different for everyone. What's important is to understand these differences as you work with people. But guess what? There's a big similarity that I want to highlight. Mind and body are not separate. Physicians often focus on the body, treating from the neck down. But we can't think like that. We have to see the person as a whole, how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and what experiences brought them to where they are. Doctors use science to focus on what they can measure with their 5 senses. If they can't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, or touch it, it doesn't exist to them. But that's not how we work. Doctors have their tools, like MRIs or X-rays, to see what the naked eye can't. They break things down to the cellular level. They rely on signs and symptoms. But we look at the whole picture. Sure, doctors ask, how's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? But here's the thing. That's just one part of it. We've got to be aware of how people feel, what's in their hearts and minds, not just their physical bodies. Because just like you, and just like me, our clients are always in a state of change. Life is always moving forward, and the present moment, well, it's gone before you even know it. So, remember, it's not just about the body. It's about the whole person, our minds, and how they flow, just like a river. Psychologist William James had this incredible analogy, saying that our consciousness is always moving, constantly flowing, and just like you can't step into the same part of a river twice, you can't stay in the same thought or feeling for long, it's always shifting. Now think about that for a second. Even though our minds are flowing, we're still right here in the present moment. It's all about staying grounded while navigating that constantly changing mental landscape. This is especially true when you're interacting with others, whether it's a client, a colleague, or a friend. You're being attentive, making sure you're present for them, while also staying true to your own values and knowledge. It's like a balancing act. You're fully focused on them, but sometimes you wish they'd just fade into the background so you can do your thing. But here's the challenge. You need to keep them engaged, stay aware of their responses, and at the same time, pay attention to how you feel. How are they reacting? Is their body language telling you something? And here's the kicker. We all share 5 senses, right? But here's where it gets interesting. We tend to get lazy in our thinking, assuming that everyone has the same common sense. But today, let's shake that up a bit. Let's have a real conversation. Let me give you an example. Now, James was a famous philosopher and psychologist who had a really cool way of describing our minds. He said our mind is kind of like a river, always flowing, always moving. You can't step into the same spot twice because, well, the water's already moved on. And guess what? Our minds are the same way, constantly shifting, changing, and flowing. Pretty wild, right? But even with all that change, we're still grounded in the present moment, right here, right now. So, if you're working with someone, whether a client, a friend, or even yourself, you have to be fully in that present, rolling with the flow, but staying focused, attentive, and ethical. Now, here's the thing. When you're really paying attention, sometimes you just wish you could get into your zone and work without distractions. But remember, it's all about that balance, keeping them engaged while also following your own instincts and training. You're not just there to listen, but also to respond, to their words, their body language, even those subtle cues. All right, let's switch gears for a sec. Let's talk about how we experience the world around us. We all share 5 basic senses, right? But, let's be honest, we get a little lazy with how we think about them. Sometimes we think everyone sees the world in the same way. But here's the kicker. You've got your unique perspective, and that's your superpower. The heart of any good conversation is, you guessed it, words. Words are everything to me. They're like the most magical tools in the universe, and I'm a bit obsessed with them, to be honest. Now, if we go back to the good old New Testament, there's that famous line in John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. For me, the Word is everything. It's how we connect, communicate, and share truths with one another. Think about it. Your primary tool in life might be your hands, your heart, your skills. But words, they are the bridge that connects us all. Here's the catch, though. Words aren't always straightforward. They're these beautiful abstractions, not just things you see or hear. Every sound, every letter means something different to each of us. And that's where it gets exciting. When I say elephant, for example, what comes to mind? I bet each of you has a slightly different mental picture of an elephant. Big, small, cartoonish, realistic, whatever it is, it's your version of the word. And that's why communication can sometimes feel like a challenge. But when you take abstract words and make them real, that's when you start to unlock true connection. And speaking of words, let's break down one more. Conversation. It's not just chit-chat. It's 2 people coming together, sharing their truths. If we dive into the word itself, con means together, and the verse part means to turn. So it's literally turning toward each other with your truths. How cool is that? I tell my students all the time, words are like plants with roots. If you know the root, prefix, and suffix of a word, you can almost always figure out its meaning, even without a dictionary. Though, let's be real, I still check the dictionary daily. At the end of the day, precision in language matters. Misunderstanding happens all the time, but the more clearly you express yourself, the more you can build trust. And trust? That's what it's all about. It comes from truth, being open, honest, and true in everything you say and do. So, let's keep this conversation going. Let's circle back to the 5 senses. You know the ones: touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste. These senses are how we interact with the world around us, and they're super important. Let's break it down. First up, touch. Imagine all the pores on your skin as little doorways letting sensations in. Whether it's warmth, coolness, or a gentle breeze, your skin feels it all. Then there's sight. This is all about light bouncing off objects and hitting your eyes, allowing you to see the world in color and shape. Pretty neat, right? For sound, your ears are picking up vibrations in the air, turning them into what you recognize as voices, music, or even birds chirping. As for smell, your nose detects all kinds of aromas from the air. Each sense is like an information superhighway leading straight into your brain. But here's the fun part. As things come into your body through these senses, emotions or feelings leave your body in response. Ever notice how something as simple as a smell can trigger a memory or feeling? This is because emotions, which are linked to movement, remember, the motion in emotion means movement, are your body's way of reacting to everything that comes in through your senses. Okay, keep that in mind for a second, and let's jump into something you've probably heard before: common sense. Most of us assume that common sense means everyone thinks or acts the same way in certain situations. Like, We assume everyone agrees on what makes sense, right? But here's the catch. Common sense isn't as common as we think. It's more of an opinion, a personal belief or view, not a universal truth. For example, what seems like common sense to one person, like wearing a jacket when it's cold, might not seem so to someone else, like a biker who rides in freezing weather. It's all based on individual experiences and preferences. Now, let's talk about something we all have: feelings. Unlike our senses, which vary from person to person, like how some people are colorblind, feelings are something we all share. In fact, there are 6 core emotions: anger, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, and surprise. These emotions show up physically on our faces and bodies. Anger might make your face flush, fear can make you tremble, and joy brightens your eyes. It's like your emotions are giving the world a peek into what's going on inside your mind. What's fascinating is that even though our senses might not be perfect, like being colorblind, our feelings are more universal, shared by most people. Across different cultures and ages, people can recognize these 6 feelings without much trouble. So, when you're working with others or just observing people, you can start to pick up on these emotional cues. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Just like every species on Earth, humans have 2 basic motivations: to survive, stay alive, and to procreate, have children. Everything we do, at its core, revolves around these 2 drives. And here's a fun fact. Have you ever noticed that in moments of panic, like almost getting into an accident, people often say the same thing? Yep, you guessed it. That's instinct, something automatic, not learned, kicking in. So, in the end, while our senses and opinions might differ, our emotions and basic drives are what make us, well, human. Now, here's a thought. We all tend to act on things without thinking, right? Whether it's repeating something we saw someone else do or reacting automatically to situations. It's like we're on autopilot. But if we take a step back, we'll see that these behaviors probably kicked in way before we even became fully conscious of them. The thing is, a lot of what we do every day is a mix of conscious and unconscious responses. You may be nodding your head, thinking, yeah, totally. But have you ever caught yourself saying something and then wondered, wait, did I just say that? It happens to the best of us. So, why does this matter? Because when you're interacting with others, whether you're in customer service, healthcare, or even just having a chat with a friend, people might express desires or feelings they're not even aware of. And that's where you come in. Being aware of both your conscious and unconscious reactions can help you better navigate these moments. Now, let's talk about some fundamental human desires: survival and, well, procreation. Big topics, right? But here's the thing. We're not always in control of these urges. And that's okay. No need to panic. It's part of being human. Imagine you're a toddler. What's the first major skill you have to master? And no, I'm not talking about walking or talking. I'm talking about potty training. Yep, that's right. Learning to control your bodily functions is one of the first steps toward living in society. But here's the kicker. No other animal, unless trained by humans, deals with this the way we do. And that's just the beginning of how we learn to manage our desires. Think about it. As we grow, we're constantly learning how to hold things, whether it's our emotions, our impulses, or even simple things like our reactions when someone cuts us off in traffic. Now, in any interaction, whether it's a professional setting or a casual hangout, people might have all kinds of unspoken desires. It could be as simple as wanting comfort or even something deeper. But don't worry, you've got this. Being mindful and respectful of these moments is key. Speaking of working with others, Let's talk about the power dynamic. When you're in a position of service or leadership, you actually have a lot of power. The person you're interacting with often relies on you to guide the conversation or the experience. They can say yes or no, but you're the one in charge of how things unfold. That's a big responsibility, and it's important to handle it with care. At the end of the day, it's all about balance. We have these natural desires for survival, for connection, for pleasure. And while we can't always control them, we can become more aware of them. And with that awareness comes a sense of power and responsibility. So, next time you're in a situation where you notice these unconscious patterns popping up, whether it's in yourself or someone else, take a moment, acknowledge it, breathe, and choose how you want to respond. Human interactions and how we instantly assess each other, often without even realizing it. You ever wonder what goes through someone's mind when they meet you? Yeah, whether you know it or not, we all have these quick, subconscious moments where we think, would I hire them? Would I work with them? Or even, are they a potential threat? It's fast, like a flash, and before we know it, we move on. But that initial moment, it's powerful. Let's break it down with a quick example. Picture this. It's a snowy day. You decide to get out of the house, go for a walk, maybe head to a park for some fresh air. As you're strolling, lost in your thoughts, suddenly you notice someone walking toward you in the distance. What's your first reaction? Here's where it gets interesting. If you're a woman, your first thought is often, do I need an escape route? It's that quick assessment of risk. Am I safe? Men, on the other hand, don't typically think, run. They pause, size up the person approaching, and figure out what to do next. They might tense up, but it's not usually about running away. Now, why do we react this way? It all boils down to instincts, natural survival mechanisms that play out differently depending on our experiences, gender, and subconscious beliefs. This is huge in understanding how we communicate with others, especially in a professional setting. For anyone working with clients, and this is especially important for those of you in fields like health and wellness, understanding these subtle, unconscious differences can be a game changer. When you're interacting with people, recognizing these cues can help you create a more comfortable and trusting environment. But let's talk about something deeper for a second. The unconscious mind. Sigmund Freud, yes, the Freud, was one of the first to dive into the concept of the unconscious. According to him, we all have these drives, some aggressive, others constructive, that push and pull us throughout life. It's like there's always a little tug-of-war going on in our minds. These drives influence everything we do, from how we act in social situations to how we connect with others on an intimate level. Speaking of connection, let's talk about relationships for a minute, specifically how society and science have shaped them. Once upon a time, things were pretty straightforward. People met, they dated, and marriage was often the end goal. But things have changed, right? One big reason? Science. In the 1950s, women started gaining independence, and with the invention of the birth control pill, they suddenly had more control over their lives, their bodies, and their futures. This shift changed the way people viewed relationships, intimacy, and even the roles men and women play in society. And we're still feeling the effects of that today. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for progress. But with change comes the need to adapt, whether we're talking about relationships or even technology, because, seriously, who isn't overwhelmed by the constant updates? We need to figure out what works for us personally. So, what's the takeaway? If there's one thing I want you to remember from today, it's this: be intentional. Whether it's with your relationships, your career, or how you interact with others, stay present and aware. Understand the differences between people, appreciate them, and always aim for quality, not just quantity. You don't need every new gadget or app, and you don't need to rush into every relationship. Take your time, be mindful, and make sure that every interaction, every decision aligns with who you truly are and what you value. Thanks for sticking with me, and have a wonderful day.